Hey everybody, welcome back to another plasma cutter review. So I know I just recently reviewed the BestArc BTC500DP Gen 10. Today we're going to take a look at the BestArc BTC500XP. We're going to go over the differences and why you may want to choose this one over the other one in today's video. So if you're in the market for a plasma cutter, you might want to stick around. Okay, so I'll let you in on the secret here. So this unit is designed specifically for use as CNC machines. Unfortunately, I don't have a CNC to use it with, but we can still use it as a regular plasma cutter. This does have the capability of being controlled by CNC controls. They provide the cables with the connectors for you, and those connectors connect in the back here. This is the way that the CNC would control all of the functions of the plasma cutter plus the pilot arc, via these cables. So then you just turn this guy on, presumably put it in CNC mode, and then let the CNC take over from there. In addition to the cables, you do come with some upgraded components. And if you compare the nozzle of the XP to the nozzle of the previous one that I reviewed, the DP, you'll notice a big difference, and that's because the DP uses a standard high frequency style pilot system, which is normal for a regular plasma cutter, where it uses a high frequency charge of electricity to start the pilot arc in order to start cutting. That high frequency charge of electricity can interfere with the sensitive electronics of a CNC system, and so that's where this comes in. And while I'm not an expert on the subject matter, the blowback system uses compressed air to push the nozzle away from the material that you're cutting in order to initiate the pilot. And it's usually found on higher end systems, and it's mainly used for systems where you wouldn't want the electromagnetic interference of a high frequency arc, and that's usually in cases where you would use this on a CNC. So like I mentioned briefly before, you can use this as a handheld unit or as a CNC unit, but in addition to that, you can continue to use this as a handheld unit even as it is hooked up to a CNC machine with these interface connections. According to the manual, simply having these plugged in will allow the machine to know that it is connected to a CNC, and so it is always on standby for the command to run as long as it's turned on. But at any time while it's hooked up to a CNC, you can still use it as a handheld machine. Another big difference between the more basic BTC500DP and the BTC500XP is the way that they connect to the base unit. As you can see in the more basic model, you have your air connection separate from your trigger and your power connections. Whereas on the BTC500XP, it is all one integrated connector with one connection, which is nice. I like this a lot better. I feel like it is a little bit more high-end. And then again, this is all with the purpose of being able to be controlled from the rear as well through the CNC port connections. This port right here is for your ground clamp, which is provided right here. And additionally, it is set up for 220 volts, but it does come with a 120 volt adapter. And as you've seen in my previous reviews, this machine works just fine on 110 up to a reasonable thickness of metal. And then if you have a need to cut thicker, you have the option of putting it on a 30 amp connection, a 30 amp 220 volt connection. They do supply some hose and hose clamps, but it already ships with a quick connect fitting pre-installed. So it is assumed you already have an air compressor set up with an air hose with quick connect fittings, and so this is pretty much plug and play as far as the air is concerned. These are the ports, the CNC interface ports I was talking about. And just once again for clarification, I am not going to be testing the CNC function on this. I am strictly going to be showing you the handheld function. So I'm going to get it all plugged in, set up, and then we'll go over the controls. Okay, the controls are pretty simple and easy to understand. This knob lets you adjust the amperage of the cut. So obviously the thicker the material you are trying to cut, the higher the amperage you'll need to use. This button lets you switch between 2T and 4T mode, and that's the way the trigger on the handheld nozzle works. 2T means as long as you're pulling the trigger, it's active. 4T means you click the trigger like a button and it activates the torch, and then you click it again to deactivate the torch. PA is your pilot arc timer, so you can adjust your pilot arc from 3 seconds all the way up to 15 seconds, and that's the amount of time that that pilot arc runs in order to get you into the material. And then PT is your post timer, which is how long the air flows after you're done cutting. So you can have that go from 3 seconds all the way up to 15 seconds. This is your air pressure indicator, and as you can see, it's showing me that my air pressure is currently high, and you can adjust the air pressure with this regulator right here. So if I want to turn down the air pressure, and again, this button up here, I guess I'll finish talking about the buttons. This button here just switches between air mode and cut mode. And so as you're playing with your air pressure, you may need to bleed some off. And you're also going to want to see what your pressure is as you're cutting. So you can use that. You can use this button just to activate the airflow. And you can see maybe that the air pressure dropped down to 64 psi as the air is actually flowing once the valve is open. You don't need a ton of air pressure for a plasma cutter. Here we go. So I'm thinking it's wanting around 50. I'll have to read the manual what the recommendation is. The last button lets you toggle between plate and mesh. Basically, plate is a continuous cut through continuous metal, and mesh is what it sounds like. It's an interrupted cut through porous objects or things. It just allows the torch to continue running even if it loses its continuity with whatever material it is in contact with. I'm not sure why you wouldn't always just keep it in mesh mode, but I'm sure there's a reason behind that. So like with all things, your air pressure, the amount of air pressure you need will depend on the amount of amperage you're running. And so this unit goes all the way up to 35 amps. Minimum is 15 amps. So your air pressure range is 30 to 50 psi. So you'd really only want 50 psi at the higher end of the range. So I can dial down my air pressure. So I'm at 40 static, and then when it's running, 35, which is good enough for me. I'm not going to be cutting anything thick today, too thick. So I think this amount of pressure, air pressure, is going to be adequate for what I'm going to be using. There are some guides in the manual, obviously, but also stuck to the top of the box, which is always nice. Quick reference guide. Sometimes they're not the most accurate, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't match between the handbook and the quick reference guide, but we'll take a quick look here. It says 110 volts, 25 amps can cut 530 seconds, all the way up to 45 amps can cut 3/8, but we can't get up to 45 amps on 110 volts, and so that is not the most correct information. The highest we can go is 35 amps, and it says here at 110 volts, 35 amps can cut 1/4 inch. In the manual, it says 35 amps can cut 10 millimeters, which is 3/8 of an inch. And so there is some discrepancy between the quick start guide and the manual. I have seen that before, and even in the Amazon listing, there's even more discrepancy. So that's just something to keep in mind. I find that with welders and with plasma cutters, it's all going to boil down to trial and error anyway, and you're going to end up finding the sweet spot through trial and error. But these guidelines in the manual or on the quick start guide just gets you in the general ballpark, and then you can make fine adjustments from there. For today's test, I am going to cut some, I don't know if this is maybe 18 or 20 gauge. It's a floor pan from my S10, or it's a floor pan from my GMC S15. And then I'm just going to jump right up to the maximum I think I can cut with this, which is about 3/8 material here. It's an old body mount. I'm going to cut it, and then I'm, like I did in the previous review, I'm also going to try a plunge cut, and we'll see how it goes and compare the results. As far as safety is concerned, I'm going to have a fire extinguisher on standby. I will be wearing welding gloves. I'll be wearing my welding helmet and a leather apron. I'll also need to change my shoes from these sneakers to some leather shoes, because if anybody's ever done welding in tennis shoes and has had slag fall down between your toes, you remember that feeling and you make sure it never happens again. So I'm going to get set up, and then after I'm set up, we'll start testing. Alright, so this offers great control. If with guides, it would be even better to control. And as you can see, I cut some just teeny tiny little holes in this thing. It's very precise. Very good performance on 18 gauge steel. I may have moved a little quick on that one. I'm going to do a second pass. Tripped my breaker just like I did in the last video. I don't think that is an issue with the plasma cutter. It just has to do with the fact that I'm trying to run this 35 amp output over a 25-foot extension cord, and it's just a little too much for my system. I'm going to go reset the breaker, finish that cut, and then we'll assess the performance. Alright, so as you can see, 3/8 is probably the absolute limit of what you can do, as long as you have the right power source. It did cut through though, on the first pass. The quality of the cut isn't the greatest, but I feel like for rough cutting material, you know, breaking down larger pieces, this would be a really good choice. It's definitely a lot quicker than using a cutting wheel or any other means that you would need to use to cut something like this, and I really feel like it's done a great job. I'm going to clean up my, no, I'm not going to clean up my mess. I do have one more thing. I'm going to try doing a plunge cut right here in the center of this plate, and we'll see how that goes. Just as I suspected, not a problem at all. So you don't have to come from the edge if you don't want to, or if you're not able to. You can start in the center and then work your way around. It's good for cutting nice holes or getting pilot holes in material. Of course, it does the heating and cooling of the steel will harden the steel a little bit, so it may make it hard to drill after that, but besides that, does a great job. And keep in mind, these are all painted surfaces. The ground clamp has no problem grounding through, you know, a thin layer of paint. I wouldn't say these are, you know, like finished surfaces by any means. So it does a good job. Well, as expected, the BestArc BTC500XP performed pretty much flawlessly. I didn't really have any issues with it. I'm pushing this machine trying to cut 3/8 inch steel at 110 volts. As you can see, my electrical system can't even handle it very well, but this does, so it does a great job. It's unfortunate that I'm not able to test the CNC function on this machine, nor am I able to test the 220 performance, but for the price of this machine, I feel like you're buying a really good plasma cutter with expandability options. So if you're in the market for a plasma cutter and you have interest in getting into plasma CNC sometime in the future, it may be worth your while to invest the small extra amount that it would cost to buy this over one that uses a high frequency pilot arc system. Generally, these blowback systems are built a little bit better, they use higher quality components, and you are set up to cut most materials that you'd encounter, plus the added functionality of being able to control with CNC. Big thanks to BestArc for allowing me to use this machine and test it out for them for a review. I'm not sponsored by them, but in exchange for my review, they are allowing me to keep this test unit. If you're interested in buying your own BestArc BTC500XP plasma cutter, You can look down in the description below. I'll provide a link that you can follow to find out more information and buy your own if you're interested. I also want to thank you, the viewer. Thanks for watching, especially to this point. It really means a lot to me, those of you that watch the videos in their entirety, and for those of you that participate by liking and by commenting on the videos. It really means a lot, and it really does help out the channel. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off. Once again, my name is Tom. This is Southpaw Workshop. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.